Hello and welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. This is episode 606. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility through this podcast since 2005. So today is another Life Lately episode. So the past few episodes in between the interviews, I've been answering questions that you all submitted for the 600th podcast episode. And there were so many great questions that I had only gotten to a certain amount during the event. So I've been following up with answers to those. And then today, as I was kind of pulling to see, are there any more that aren't kind of already answered because they're related to other questions that I answered? And the only one I found was about traveling solo in Paris. So I was thinking that might be its own podcast episode. So stay tuned for that. But in the interim, what I wanted to share is what I'm reading, what I'm working on, what I'm delighting in, what I'm struggling with. Now, what is going on life lately here at Tranquility du Jour? And, a gentle reminder to hit the subscribe button in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And also head on over to kimberlywilson.com/podcast because there's information on how to leave a review if you would be willing, and also how to submit a topic for review. I always love hearing from you and knowing what is it that is most on your mind right now. And if you are new to Tranquility du Jour, a big welcome. And you can find out more, including some really great downloadables and inspiration at kimberlywilson.com/new. Now, a few things that are coming up that I want to make sure get on your radar is May 16th, which is tomorrow, is my pet loss support session. And I do these seasonally and would love to have you with us if you are dealing with anticipated pet loss or pet loss that has recently happened, or even that you're still dealing with from, a previous loss. So just know that all are welcome, and it's not a substitute for therapy, but it is a therapeutic session to help kind of nurture you and give you tools in the process, and it is free. And then the next one will probably be in around August. And then also July 15th is my next virtual retreat. It's the mid-year one. I think they're all special, right? But there's something about mid-year where we really just hone in on how are things going? How are things looking? How are things feeling? So if you are interested in that, I would love to have you with us, and you can join the wait list at kimberlywilson.com/virtual retreat. So let's start with what I'm reading. Now, I recently did an Instagram reel that showed a peek into quite a few of the books. It's really ridiculous. This year in particular, I've always had a book buying problem, but this year in particular, I would say really since the start of the year, it's been a little out of control. And I just have to say, because there's so many amazing books out there, and then I read a book that mentions other books, and then I need those books, quote unquote. And so it's kind of gotten out of hand. Anyway, I interviewed someone who I will be sharing her podcast with you. I think it's the next episode, The Empress, which is she's just delightful. And she told me about Christina Wallace, who wrote a book called The Portfolio Life. So I just picked that one up. That is my newest. What Fresh Hell Is This? By Heather Corina. And this it was recommended in a course I did on menopause and perimenopause. And the subtitle is Perimenopause, Menopause, and Other Indignities and You. And so anyway, she's supposed to be quite funny. And this seemed like a really helpful book, right? As we think about contemplating and navigating this time in our lives, which is midlife. So the other book that was recommended, thank you, Carrie, I blame you for this, is The Creative Act, A Way of Being by Rick Rubin. Now, you may know him as an amazing producer. Anyway, I got this book, too, over the weekend and look forward to diving in. Apparently, it gets rave reviews. This book is an older book. I mean, it's quite a bit older. It's called The Dancer's Way. Let's see, when did this book come out? 2008. I guess it's not that old. It just seems really old. The Dancer's Way, the New York City Ballet Guide to Mind, Body, and Nutrition. And it's written by a therapist who is a former dancer. And it just sounded really interesting. And it was recommended in a ballet memoir I just read called Don't Think, Dear, which was so good. And then the other book, or one of the other many books that I'm reading, and it's just so good that I really am savoring it, almost like a fine wine or a candle that you only burn occasionally because it's just so good. And it's called She Builds, The Anti-Hustle Guide to Grow Your Business and Nourish Your Life. This is just a lovely, lovely book. And then, of course, Women Without Kids, Loving It. So many good books right now, but those are just a few of the ones that I wanted to mention. And I'll also put a link in the show notes to the Instagram reel that highlights some of the other books. And there's just so many good ones right now. I don't know if there's just more coming out or I'm just being exposed to more, but I am really blown away with all the goodness that's out there. One last book that I do want to mention that was recommended to me by a friend who knew my family friend who passed away in January, and it's called Signs. And I just got it. And the idea is, it's called The Secret Language of the Universe. And it's about signs from loved ones on the other side. And it just sounded really interesting. You know, I got a text message from my friend's mother, and she was like, I won these flowers for Mother's Day. And I, ran into this famous person who gave me a signed copy of something that he does, and she was like, it was as if my son was taking care of me from the other side, right? I mean, she didn't say the other side, but it was making sure that I was taken care of on Mother's Day, and it was just the sweetest, right? So, and I yesterday saw an Eastern box turtle, which I'm obsessed. I've loved turtles since I was a little girl. Anyway, I went to go check on him multiple times throughout the morning, and by the afternoon he had moved on and was no longer visible to me. And I was so sad. I was like, he probably got tired of the weird lady checking in on him. But anyway, I'm like, was that a sign? It's like all these things of our loved ones coming to visit us in these different forms. So anyway, I have not read the book yet. I just got it last weekend, and I look forward to reading it. And so anyone else who is interested, maybe who has experienced loss and is looking for a sense of signs, you may find the book interesting. All right, so that is what I'm reading, which is many, and way too many. What am I working on? So this is one of the pieces I was really excited to share with you. Okay, first of all is my ballet solo. So I don't even want to count because it makes me scared, but I think in 6 weeks, I will be performing a solo that I have been working on, you guys, since the freaking fall. I want to say October. I think that's when I was back to ballet. It was October. And then my teacher pulled together the choreography for Les Sylphides, the prelude, which is beautiful. And I want to thank Monica, a friend in New York who is a fellow ballet lover, and she recommended this for my solo. And I am just obsessed with it. It really is beautiful, although it's also incredibly challenging for me. And I've decided I am going to be doing it on point because March and April, I really hunkered down, did tons of point classes, and got to feel more comfortable on point. And so I am doing the solo on point. So anyway, that is a big thing I've been working on. It literally consumes every waking creative moment. You should be doing this. You should be practicing. So I'm like, I can't wait till the June 30th, my 50th birthday, when this is over, so I can kind of have my life back and resume. However, it has also been incredibly nourishing to have something like this to practice for and strive for. And there's something that is really, really special about that. And I also look forward to kind of having it behind me just so that like life can move on, right? You probably have all experienced this. You have an event coming up or you have a deadline or something where you're like, oh, once this is over, mama can take a break. And that's how I'm feeling. And yet also cannot wait for this experience. So the performance and the festival is happening in Miami again, which is where it was last year. And then I'll also be performing in 2 group pieces, which I still need to learn. We've been learning the choreography since April, but I really need to hone in on it. So anyway, I've got 6 weeks. I'm doing it. So that is my big thing I'm working on. The other pieces are for September. I hope to release quite a few micro courses for you. Just little tangible bite-sized courses on the various tenets of Tranquility du Jour, a mental health micro course, and I'm thinking a midlife one too. And that may actually not happen in the fall, but may come a little bit later. And so kind of pulling all of these things together and getting it in a really kind of sweet, easy, accessible kind of back-end system for you. And of course, working on all the content. So that is in the works. And then the other thing that I'm really so excited about, and a couple of maybe a month or 2 ago, I got a letter from my publisher, New World Library, and they're reverting the rights of Tranquilista, which is my second book, back to me. And it's going out of print on their end. And so I am going to be taking the book and redesigning it, re-editing it, revising it, and updating it to make it a more midlife version of having, a more tranquil existence in work and play. And I can't wait to share it with you. My hope, my goal, okay, this is where we are as of this moment, but my goal, and especially once I get through the ballet stuff, is to release at holiday. So we'll see. I've got a beautiful illustrator working on the cover right now, which you may recall the cover of Tranquilista. It was just absolutely gorgeous. And it has 4 different girls at a cafe. And the idea is, okay, we need girls at a cafe, but they are middle-aged women. And maybe the pug is not in a bag. Maybe the pug's in a stroller. Right? So just like the evolution of all of us and the ways in which we have changed. Oh my goodness, since 2010, you guys, 13 years. So I am really excited about this. And again, I will be diving into this after the performance. So right now my creative energy is going to the coterie, which is my year-long program, and then also into ballet. So that is what I'm working on. And again, I can't wait to share all of that with you. And I also just recently released a bunch of Tea with Kimberly videos over on YouTube. So free videos. I hope they're helpful and I hope they're inspiring. Anything from, ways to get grounded, to mindful movement, to setting up a small space and living in a small space. And also, this was a fun one, mood boards, right? So this idea of designing a collection or thinking of what you want for the season and doing that in a mood board sort of way. So I share some tips on that. So I hope those are helpful and inspiring for you. And if you have any particular questions or ideas on topics, please don't hesitate to reach out because I love hearing from you and I love creating for you. And again, I hope to get back to more of that once this door is behind me of all the ballet. All right, so what am I delighting in? All right, what am I delighting in? So one thing that is really sweet is I had a tea party last weekend. And I just got the photos back from the photographer and they're so sweet. And, delighting in this idea of hosting and creating in that way is really something that I recognize that is I just love. And I want to pull together. So look for this in a future blog post or podcast episode on kind of hosting your own tea party. And, I've figured out a little bit of tips and kind of tricks and tools that help. And of course, afterwards, I'm always like, okay, I should have done this, or I need to do that, ways to even make it better. But this year's really came together nicely. And from the food and the beverages and all of that. So I'll be pulling together a little kind of toolkit for you, but I wanted to just mention as something that I am delighting in, because it is something that I recognize is just so special and so fun, which is hosting people. And really what that comes down to is creating an experience for others, right? And I like to do that through various things, like from leading retreats over the years, virtual and in person, to hosting people in my home, to hosting my clients in my therapy space, to hosting people at the yoga studio. All those sorts of things there's something about creating an experience and a space for people that really is such a treat to be able to do. So that is one of the things that I'm delighting in again. And I'll throw in a couple of the photos from the tea party into the show notes, which will be at KimberlyWilson.com/606, just to give you a little peek. And then again, look for a blog post or a podcast on that coming shortly. Okay, so struggling with. So I wrote about this in this week's Love Note, so I hope everybody got it. I sent it out on Sunday, which is rare for me. I don't usually send on Sunday, but I kind of liked it. So you may start getting Love Notes on Sundays. Anyway, one of the things I was talking about is just the challenge of kind of in the moment overwhelm, right? And getting what we can describe as activated. Right. So I'll give an example, the tea party, which I was delighting in. However, okay, so the tea party, my mother was in town, which is lovely, but hosting somebody in my space for days, right? In my tiny little space. I had all of the pets. My partner was in New York visiting his family. And one of the pets, my lovely Gizmo, was sick. So the night before the tea party, and I was up constantly. My mom counted 12 times from midnight until 6:30 in the morning. And then I had somebody coming to the house at 8 a.m. to spray paint my outdoor furniture. So needless to say, I got very little sleep. Okay. And then I was, of course, really worried about Gizmo, who is fine. He goes through these bouts like once a week, but unfortunately this was the absolute worst he has ever had. And of course, it's before I am going to be hosting. And then, it's like all the kind of setup and all the little, the little logistics, right? Of like putting little gifted teas into little glassine bags and sealing with washi tape, or tagging all the clothing for the pop-up, or, cutting the crust off the tea sandwiches, right? So it was just nonstop until the photographer arrived and then our guests arrived. And then, hosting for a few hours. So in that moment, I just was recognizing just like how kind of like overstimulated I was. And again, when you host, that kind of comes with the territory, but it was also like doing all that on like 2 hours of sleep and just like, complete kind of, chaos of sorts, right? And so that was challenging because, of course, you don't want people to know kind of what you are dealing with. And yet, how do you really stay kind of grounded and connected and rooted in the moment, right? So I just find this interesting that I'm delighting in, and it's also a struggle. And again, the struggle, came from extenuating circumstances. There's no way I could have predicted that poor Gizmo would have been sick all night, right? So, in that moment, it's like, okay, what can I do to calm and nourish myself, right? So making sure I'm staying hydrated, making sure I'm taking deep, full breaths. Another thing is placing my hand over my heart center. I notice ever since I learned that in a training, I recognize that I do that constantly. So I'm even doing it now as I'm talking to you, and it's one of those small little pieces that can help get us grounded and into our bodies. So, my hope is for you that might also be helpful as you think about those moments when you're like, oh my gosh, what else could possibly go wrong? Or what else could possibly happen? Or how else could I possibly be stretched or pulled in another direction, right? And you're going to be pulled in one more or two more. It's just kind of the way things work. And the more we can learn to nourish ourselves in that moment, the less kind of overwhelming the whole experience can become. So I hope that's helpful as you think about in your own life, okay, what is it that is most challenging for me? And in those moments, how can I just let myself know you're going to be okay, or you're doing a good job, or you'll get through this. You will sleep again at some point, right? So that is what I wanted to share with you on kind of where I've been struggling of just like recognizing and being able to navigate those moments of overwhelm. During a podcast interview over the weekend, one of the women I was speaking with was like, I just feel that so many people are teetering on the edge of rage, right? And it's as if just we do not have the tolerance that we once had, or we're just so pulled and stretched that the littlest things are setting us off. And of course, we're seeing that in America with the horrific things that are happening with regard to gun violence. Somebody pulls up into the wrong driveway and is shot. So it's these moments where you're like, am I there too, right? Where it's like just one more thing, one more doorbell ring, or one more request, or one more delay of the person in front of us at the red light, and we just lose it. And, this is just one of those pieces as we think about tranquility in the everyday, is how do we make sure that we're as full as possible so that we are not getting so close to rage, right? That we are able to manage and nourish and kind of give ourselves a little bit of balm, BALM, and a little bit of just deep, deep care. One of the pieces that I also mentioned in the love note was the book Burnout by Emily Nakowski. And in it, she talks about how we have to complete our stress cycles, or, that is going to lead to burnout. And so I just encourage you, as you think about kind of your own struggles of like, how can you complete a stress cycle? So that can be things like taking deep breaths, physical movement, physical affection, connection with others, laughter, crying, right? So for yourself, just thinking of how can I take good care of myself and complete the stress cycles, just knowing that, life, it's never like, oh, it'll get easier when X, right? And I think so often we can feel that way. Even me, I'm saying, oh, well, once the ballet performance is over, I can turn my attention to other things. Yes, I can. And it's not like, oh, life is just magically going to get easier. And yet, space will open up. So sometimes it's like, okay, this is a phase of life. Once I get through this, then things will be quieter, right? And so recognizing that for yourself, and in those moments though, when it just is feeling so overwhelming, and it may feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, like it's going to be this intense forever, just recognizing that the idea of impermanence and how to take care of yourself in the process, right? Because that's what tranquility in the everyday is all about. And, the last thing I'll just say kind of with regard to struggling with is having to put so much on hold, right? So this month in the Coterie, we're exploring the idea of minimalism. And minimalism, it's not just not buying stuff or, filling your home with things. it's so much more than that. It's looking at your time, your energy, your money, all of those like energetic pieces of ourselves, and asking ourselves like, okay, how is this serving me? Or how does this align with my values? And one of the pieces that I shared with the coterie during our masterclass at the start of the month was how, that I have just learned over the years or how I have practiced minimalism, and I shared, right, like releasing the yoga studios, that was 18 years of my life. And I even just had like a kind of PTSD-ish dream about it the other night. Like it continues to haunt me. And I don't mean that like in a negative way, because that sounds really negative, but just like so many of the challenges and struggles there, they continue to come up. So this is what it was. It was in my mind, and I'm like back at the studio. I was teaching something, and one of the students like raised their hand and said, I just wish you would have let us know that you were going to be recording this, because it was for like a teacher training, so that I could have known in advance, right? And I remember saying, and this is just one of those things that it just like sticks with me. And this never happened, but things like this always happened. And I was like, oh, well, it was in the description when you signed up, but I'll be sure to, have it called out better next time, right? So it was one of those things where it's like, I had done all I felt I could do to inform the people of whatever this was, some sort of teacher training, and that I was recording because I guess for people who wouldn't be able to make it live, then they could rewatch it and still get their teacher training hours. Anyway, and, and it was just feeling like called out for something I actually had done, but they hadn't read or noticed. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, how am I having these dreams like 7 years later after selling the studio? Or I guess it's 6 years later, because it's 2017. But anyway, I say all this to share that, we have these particular experiences that stick with us, right? And continue to come up and pop up. And as we think about our lives, what are things that would be helpful for us to let go of, to release? And, again, for me, it was selling the yoga studios. It was even, this year I put my memoir on hold for a couple months, and I hope to pick it back up after I get through this other book that I want to release for you guys at holiday. But, I told my writing coach, I'm like, I just have to use my creative energy to focus on the ballet stuff for now, because I just couldn't do it all. I was feeling too pulled. And, creatively, we only have so much juice. So that was an example of how I was using minimalism. Right. So for you, what might it be as you think about areas in which you struggle? Is there anything you could let go of, or just put on the back burner, let it simmer for a little bit and know you're going to come back to it? So that was kind of my take on minimalism as I shared it with the coterie earlier this month. All right, Les, well, I hope this is helpful as you think about your own life and the ways in which we get activated, we have dreams, and we also have the responsibility to be gentle and kind to ourselves in the process. I will also put over in the show notes an office tour reel that I put up last week, and a home tour reel that I put out over the weekend that gives you just a little peek into the Pink Palace, along with new Tea with Kimberly videos, a link to all of those, which I hope are helpful for you. All right, loves, a gentle reminder, if you have not yet signed up for Love Notes, to do so. There's a link in the show notes, and you can also find it at KimberlyWilson.com/Love Notes. And I'm going to be sending out a really fun Everyday Tranquility PDF for everyone who is signed up within the next couple of weeks. So please do so, and you'll get that little PDF. Also, there's a link to my books and planners, and links to follow along on Instagram and YouTube. and to shop the locally sewn eco-friendly clothing line TDJ, and check out the new ballet court collection, which is so much fun. And then finally, if you have a moment to share a review on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, or Goodreads, would be so grateful, and you may just hear it on the show. All right, have a wonderful week ahead, and I look forward to being back into your ears in a couple of weeks.